What's up, hooligans? I know it's been a minute. I promise I haven't been hiding from you, but we're back. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm Susan Lopez, tactical dietitian, and today we are going to be talking headlines. So, really, I just missed you guys, and I was looking for an excuse to get on here and record a new episode. So, here we are. We're going to start doing something new, and I am essentially just going to get on here and vent about all the different things that you guys bring to my attention, and maybe even some of the BS I see in the headlines. And so, we have three things that we're going to talk about today. I pulled up a couple of articles this week, some things that I was interested in, just put some words into the old Google machine to see what my colleagues and peers and other nutritionists are talking about. And here's what came up. So we're going to pick it apart and we're going to talk about how this applies to you or does not apply to you as the tactical athlete. And the first article we're going to pull up, let's see, we got this from US News, their health panel. So they actually spoke with a dietitian. And the headline on this reads, Weight Loss for Men, Best Diet plus Tips for Losing Weight. Because that's what we all want, right? We want to lose weight. It's not a terrible article, right? But it's to the typical stuff that you would normally see and that you normally hear, especially from dietitians. So here are the 4 best diet plans for men, according to this registered dietitian. Topping the list, number 1 is the Mediterranean diet. Number 2, the DASH diet. 3, the paleo diet. And 4, the keto diet. Now, keep in mind that we're going to make an assumption that this article wasn't written for you, the tactical athlete. 1, because it doesn't say that it was written for you. And 2, because 70% of the population is overweight and or obese. This is likely to be focused on that particular population. But let's see what they have to say. So the Mediterranean diet, if you're not familiar with the Mediterranean diet, is really just an unprocessed whole food diet. It's been popularized over the last, 30, 40 years. And don't hate this one. I actually have recommended this one to certain individuals myself for anti-inflammatory needs because this diet emphasizes high quality foods, unprocessed foods. If you're dealing with potentially some autoimmune issues, I think this is probably one of my favorites. Where sometimes people can get into trouble with this diet is if they're not also incorporating adequate protein intake. But this one, I definitely would give it a 9 out of 10 as far as being something that you could potentially follow if you're looking to get in more fruits and vegetables, more fiber, and you're wanting to just clean up your diet in general. Number 2 on the list is the DASH diet, okay? So the DASH diet, this is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension. I have mixed feelings about this diet. Now, if you have hypertension, high blood pressure, you're on medication for high blood pressure, obviously you always want to follow your doctor's recommendations and the dietitian that you are hopefully working with. You should definitely take their recommendations seriously. However, if you're not in that category right now, I'm not a huge fan of this diet just because, again, if we're talking about an athletic or a active individual, maybe somebody who works around the heat, sweats a lot, does a lot of physical activity, this diet's not really going to be appropriate for you because of your higher need for sodium due to electrolyte losses. And as you guys know, the dietary guidelines for Americans that come out every 5 years, maybe you don't know, but I'm a dietitian, so it's my job to know. So every 5 years, the USDA loves to put out these dietary guidelines for Americans. What you might not know is in 2015, they actually removed the recommendations to follow a low cholesterol diet very quietly. They didn't tell anybody because they realized that the information that they were putting out for, 40 years was maybe not correct about cholesterol in eggs. So there's just a little bit of a tidbit for you. So these new 2020-2025 dietary guidelines for American, which is mentioned in the article along with the DASH diet, talks about people ages 13 and older need to consume less than 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day as part of a healthy eating pattern. Most people on average are getting about 3,400 milligrams per day. Whoever wrote this article or the dietitian who wrote this article, right, would probably shit herself if she knew that in some cases I recommend anywhere between 5 to 6 milligrams of sodium per day for extremely active individuals, especially those who are working in the heat. In fact, the recommendations for somebody who is working in hot conditions and sweating is 5 to 800 milligrams per hour during work. So if you were to do, 2 to 3 hours of work, right? You're sweating, you're taking in salt, you've already met your sodium needs for the day. So this doesn't necessarily align with an athletic population. So you just want to be really careful about this. Some interesting stuff that's coming out in blood pressure research is really just the role that potassium actually plays in your blood pressure. And again, this information isn't really new, but it's not stuff you're ever seeing come to the mainstream, at least delivered in the most appropriate way. So really, you have to be careful with potassium. Too little can actually increase your blood pressure, and too much can actually increase incidence of tachycardia or rapid heartbeat, or, because of the way that the heart works with the sodium potassium pump, right? So not a huge fan of this one, right? I think honestly, if you're really wanting to manage blood pressure, the Mediterranean diet is probably still your best bet. All right. Number 3, this says the best muscle building diet, the paleo diet. Again, not a huge fan of this one or the next one. The next one mentioned is the keto diet. Now, the reason that I'm not a huge fan of these diets for the tactical population, especially if you're an individual who works within the tactical community and you're still doing a lot of work on the front lines, being super physically active, you already know that I'm a big proponent of making sure that you're getting adequate carbohydrate intake to fuel your physical activity. And so neither one of these diets contains a substantial amount of carbohydrates. The paleo diet is high in protein, but it does require you to eliminate any foods that were supposedly not part of the human diet within the last 10,000 years. And that does include most grains. It's more of like a hunter-gatherer style diet. Same thing with the keto diet. Not a huge fan because of the low, extremely low carbohydrate intake that it recommends. Now, does that mean that I would tell someone never to do the ketogenic diet? No, because that's not really my place, right? I'm an educator. You guys are adults. You do whatever the fuck you want. But one of the things that people need to understand about the ketogenic diet is it's not just a calorie restrictive diet or a diet for weight loss. The keto diet actually changes the way that your metabolism functions. When you don't have adequate energy from carbohydrates, you don't have enough glucose or glycogen, then your body has to use alternative means to supply energy to the cells in the brain, and that typically occurs through the production of ketones. Now, if you're somebody who's dealing with prediabetes or diabetes, this can actually be life-threatening because you're not adequately able to clear those ketones from your body. You can actually end up with ketoacidosis, right? And this can be life-threatening, so you need to be really careful. We already know that individuals within the tactical population already struggle with weights, with cardiovascular disease, and with blood sugar issues. I see it all the time. And so we need to be really careful when we're executing a diet like this. Most people don't even execute it correctly. This diet also changes the way that your body uses sodium. So you tend to excrete an exponential amount of sodium in your urine when you're following a ketogenic diet. This can be problematic if you're somebody who's going to be working in the heat, you're going to be sweating a lot, you're going to be doing a lot of physical activity. And then on top of that, if you're already having blood sugar dysregulation issues, again, there it can be another life-threatening situation where you can be set up for things like hyponatremia, heat injuries, dehydration. And in serious cases, I've even seen where people have had to be hospitalized because they went into acute renal failure and had to be dialyzed. And of course, heat injuries can also cause death. So I kind of get on my soapbox a little bit with this one. So I just want you to be aware of this. Now, it does give you some general recommendations, right? If you're looking to lose weight, be mindful of your calorie intake, increase your protein intake, increase your fiber intake. Both advice that I would definitely give. I wouldn't typically start off with calories necessarily, but definitely increasing your fiber, increasing your protein intake. One of the easiest ways to help manage your weight. limit bad fats, whatever the fuck that means, and boost your intake of omega-3s. I can totally get behind that. So, I mean, this article's okay. I wouldn't say that I'm a huge fan of it. One of the things that it does also mention is that your protein intake should be about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, and that is super low. And we know that, especially for an active population. It does mention that if you are active, your protein intake may need to be higher, but still, I think the recommendations are still way too low. So, not bad. Definitely not one of the worst articles I've ever seen. But again, remember that this probably wasn't written for you, the tactical athlete. So, whenever you see things like this in mainstream media, just be careful. All right, the second one we're going to look at. All right, so this one is coming from BuzzFeed. And this says registered dietitian nutritionists voted on some of their top foods for 2023. Okay, so this was actually written a little bit earlier in the year. It was written in February, but it kind of got my attention because it said registered dietitian nutritionist voted. And I'm like, I didn't get an email. So who are you asking? Yes, no. I mean, I'm like 50-50 on this because I don't really understand why some of the things are on this list. But really what they're looking at is they're looking at, okay, what foods are actually trending this year? It doesn't necessarily state that they're recommending these foods, right? And so I think that can be a little bit misleading. It almost seems like when you read through the article, these are the foods that dietitians are recommending. And I would definitely not agree with some of these. I do agree that people are looking for more affordable foods and are shopping more based on their values. And so I think that's good, but affordability is also a consideration as things get more and more expensive. And then, of course, looking to support immunity has been a big thing. What's interesting is on this list, they actually said that dairy milks should be considered a superfood. You know, like, okay, so we use non milk in our household because my son has a cow's milk protein allergy. And I actually just like almond milk, but I grew up on, whole milk, the whole, gallon a day in our household, just milk with breakfast, milk with dinner. I love milk with my pizza. I know that's weird to some people. I feel there's probably two people in the world who exist, those who drink milk with their pizza and those who think it's disgusting. One of the things as I got into my late 20s and 30s is that I felt like I was having much more frequent headaches. And I hesitate to mention this because I don't want to say it was because of the milk. But even before I had my son, we switched to almond milk. And then, of course, I got pregnant, had my son, and he came out with a milk allergy. So, like, my brain is like, well, maybe my kid has a milk allergy because I didn't drink enough milk when I was pregnant. But, that's not my area of expertise. But the reason that I don't necessarily agree with non-dairy milk being a superfood is because it's essentially water. There's no protein typically in it. If you look at some of the milks, like oat milk or the sweetened varieties, they're typically going to be loaded with sugar without any protein. And that is a big disadvantage over cow's milk, in my opinion. Cow's milk is one of the most nutritionally balanced and adequate foods there is. I'm just not a big fan of the plant milk as being a super food. But yes, we do consume it. Now, there is some research also talking about A2 milk and how that is more agreeable to the human digestive system. So maybe that's something that we need to talk about later on. But I would definitely not consider things like almond milk, oat milk, fucking cashew milk, whatever kind of milks they have now. I would not consider those a superfood. One of the things I do like on this list, though, is that the number one spot belongs to fermented foods, right? And so this is great for your gut microbiome. So we're talking about things like kimchi, yum, kombucha, yes. Pickled vegetables, yes. So these are all things that I think are fantastic. They should have put sauerkraut on this list. Also, I realized that they did not make this list all inclusive. But these are two staples that we typically keep in our fridge and are going to add a spoonful to just about every meal is sauerkraut, kimchi. One of the things that I do enjoy drinking is kombucha. The little fizziness really satisfies kind of my sweet tooth a little. And so if you guys know anything about me, you guys know that I had like a big diet soda thing for years. And it's really just the carbonation and the flavor that I enjoy, the mouthfeel. That always sounds like such a dirty word, mouthfeel. But the kombucha, especially when I mix it with some carbonated water, really gives me that same effect. And so I love it. So don't agree with number 10 on this list. Love number 1 on this list. It does list a couple of other things that are always typically considered superfoods, right? I'm also not a fan of that term. Chia seeds, hemp seeds, blueberries, avocados, nuts and seeds, leafy greens, etc. All right. And then this one is just fun. I love it. Raw diet for dogs is taking over TikTok. What does your vet think of this latest trend? And so this article is coming from Fox News. And I have to share a personal story about what we do with our dog. You're like, what does dog nutrition have to do with me, the tactical athlete? Well, nothing. I mean, unless you're a canine handler, then you should be super interested in this article. Or maybe you're just a dog lover, right? So this article is just fun. And it's making me really rethink that maybe I chose the wrong species to work with. Just kidding. I love you guys. So me personally, you guys know that my husband has a Presa Canario. And I say my husband, even though we got the dog together, because the dog is my husband's dog. He just loves my husband, right? My husband's the alpha. Makes sense. Whatever. So we actually started feeding our dog a raw food diet a few years ago when we lived in Houston. Through some of the different moves, we did switch back to kibble for a short time just because it was more convenient for me and during times of moving back and forth and just, financially and just convenience. But there's some huge differences that we notice when we feed our dog actual real food versus kibble. And when we're talking about real food, I'm talking like chicken breasts, chicken drums, chicken feet, organ meat, eggs, tripe, just different things. And we've done our homework on this just to make sure that we are doing things that are appropriate for the dog. We're keeping our dog safe, right? Okay, just keep in mind, I'm not a dog nutritionist, so I'm just giving you my personal story. But interestingly, the person that they used to be the subject matter expert for this article, she is actually a certified canine nutritionist. I didn't even know you could do this, right? So I had to look it up. So her particular certification comes from the Companion Animal Sciences Institute, which looks like it might be a Canadian institution. I'll have to look deeper into this. But you can actually get certified as a canine nutritionist, and it costs about 1,000 Canadian dollars. But it looks like anybody can probably take this course. You just, you got to do the conversion. And so this is really interesting. It goes through canine microbiome, digestibility and metabolism of carbohydrates, amino acids. I mean, it's a lot of the same things that you would see in a human nutrition certification. So super interesting. I did also find one through Feed Real Institute. And this is a certified professional canine nutritionist, right? And these are all, trademarks for whatever organization that they're being put out by. This one is about $200, but interestingly, it's approved as a New York State continuing education for vets and vet techs. So has some legitimacy behind this one, but it sounds like you're going to get the most benefit from it if you have a little bit of a background. But it does say that they think anybody who works with dogs, dog trainers, groomers, pet sitters, and any dog lover interested in canine nutrition could take this course. And for a year of access and then to get your certification, it is approved for CEs for, looks like, some different veterinary organizations. And it's $300. So that's really interesting. Now, when we look at my dog's diet, one of the biggest differences that we noticed is just the bulk of his poop, right? So if you've ever had a dog, my dog is like 120 pounds. And when this dog is on kibble, he shits bricks, literally. Like sometimes it's so large, right, that my husband's gigantic hand can barely pick it up. Like if he's just like using two hands to like scoop it in the tiny ass dog bags, right? It's horrific sometimes. And so when my dog is on kibble, he will shit like this. like 2 or 3 times a day. And then he just drinks a fuck ton of water. And he does this thing where he like shakes his jowls. So if you've ever had a mastiff before, and then there's just like slobber just flung all over everything. Like I will just be walking through the house and I will get hit with like a booger bomb. It's disgusting. It's horrific. When my dog is on real dog food, he drinks less water. His shits are 100 times smaller and less frequent. And his skin actually doesn't flake as much. And he tends to just be springier. And so when we're talking about dogs, their nutrition is going to be just as important as human nutrition. So we are big fans of the raw food diet. This particular article, there is a veterinarian in here who's like, doesn't think that it's healthy for the dog. And then there's a veterinarian in here who's practicing from a more holistic standpoint, who is a big proponent of it, especially if you're doing it correctly. So just me as a human nutritionist, I think, and a dog owner and lover, I think this is a fantastic way to feed your dog if you're able to afford it, because it definitely is more pricey than kibble, right? But we are big fans of it. And so this is something you should definitely do your research on if this is something that you're interested in. My guys who are working with dogs, you should take this course. Or find a course to take. I think this would be super beneficial. Something to think about maybe after you leave the service or, after you leave your organization. I know tons of bougie people who would pay you to learn how to feed their dog. Billionaires hire private chefs for themselves all the time. Maybe you could be a private dog chef, make $1 million a year. I'm just saying. I'm a fan of it. I love it. All right, so that's all the headlines I got for you guys today. If you have some interesting articles or things that you want to discuss on our next headlines episode, make sure you shoot them over to me. Send me a message over on Instagram. That's typically where I hang out. Just drop in my DMs at tactical.dietitian. And if you're interested in learning more about who we are and what we do, make sure you head over to tacticaldietitian.com. All right, that's it. I got other shit to do. So thanks for hanging out with me for the last 20 minutes or so. And I will see you next time.